Has this ever happened to you? You open up the project and it sounds like this? Well, don't worry, I'm here to help. Because here are 10 tips to take your tracks from alright to awesome. Alright, so this project is going to be everything I'm going to use as an example. The first tip is layering. So the first thing in this layering tip would be to add subtle background fillers. Going into this track, for example, if I play the build-up area and then the first drop, and then later I'll explain what is going on. So you get the idea. So the first thing that comes to mind, what is in the foreground, right? Obviously it's the vocals, the bass lines, and the drums. But those are just the vocals, the bass line, and the drums. And there's a whole lot of stuff going on in the background that really add. One of them is this one. Just a note that slowly swells. It's moving, so it'll help move the whole thing so that it doesn't become a static energy. That makes sense. And the other one is another pad, which adds in the background. And now if I play it again, you might hear them. So there you go. The thing about this, with subtle background fillers, is you have to only hear the difference when it's not there. It's like you have a nice painting on the wall, but you don't want the color of the wall to mess up the painting or just distract you from whatever it is you want to be looked at, you want to be heard. Going on to number 2, this one is really rooted in the fundamental understanding of how compositions can really level up. It's breaking the blocks, as I like to call it. As you can see in this song structure, you can kind of make out the blocks that are going on. So there's a block here, there's a block here, there's a block here, and then there's a block here. So if I would only add new elements when a block ends, it's gonna be independent, and it's gonna be too independent. It doesn't sound like a whole. You smear them out, which means take a layer from block A into block B, make them fade out, make them transition into A or B. To give an example, something I did with the vocals, which I do with a lot of stuff I always work with, is on this final hook in the vocal, I just increase the wetness of a reverb. So what happens, and it stays there and kind of fades out, so it kind of slowly carries it to the drop. In context, so this is a very nice way to kind of smudge out wrinkles that you might find. It happens all over the place. Start listening, that's also a great tip for later. What's cool to do is start listening to one of your favorite tracks and listen to what they are doing. But anyway, tip number 3, using reference tracks. And by using reference tracks, I don't mean copy their sounds, but I mean listen to the mix, listen how they balance the layers, how they balance all the different instruments. For instance, what can happen if you're a beginner, you might not have all the best equipment available to you, which is totally fine. We have to start somewhere. Something that can happen a lot is the kick is too loud. So just have something on the side which you want to use as an example. Once you compare it to your project, so have like YouTube open, Spotify open right next to your DAW, then just start pausing and playing in between both of them. And then you realize, okay, my guitar is way too loud. Oh, my kick is super quiet. Number 4, keep it simple. Now, this is something that I had to remind myself of in the beginning a lot. Because obviously it's a new world, you're figuring shit out for the first time and you want to use everything you do. Obviously, you please do make everything, but don't use it all in one song. Make sure that there's one main theme. If you're like, oh, I just stumbled upon this, I really want to use it, save it for a different project. Because this way you can not only boost your workflow, because this sound that you just made or stumbled upon or sample you found, it could give you more inspiration. So save those fragments for other projects. Number 5, find your own style. Now, this will take time. This is not something that I can tell you how to do, because it is those 4 other tips that I gave you. This is a learning curve of already using those and finding out what works for you, what you might want to do, what you might not want to do. And you can only find those things if you try them. Just stick around. Number 6, don't force your workflow when you start. This is something that might sound counterproductive, but believe me, it's the exact opposite. If it's like, yeah, I really want to work on something, you open something up and you realize, okay, I added some stuff, and then you're stuck. And then what I always did is I started waiting for something as like an eureka moment of like, oh, okay, now I hear something, but that never happened. And meanwhile, I did this. I kept replaying the project that I already had, and I kept being like, oh, I can't hear anything. I was like, okay, I'll let it rest, come back the next day, and I still didn't hear anything, and I kept falling in the pit of, yeah, I have no idea what's coming up, and this is like a mental state, so you should kind of cut yourself off when you're right in the flow. For instance, I was working on this song, I was like, oh yeah, I should add a whole like group of just shakers and hi-hats so that it adds to the layer. And then I'm like, okay, I'll do that tomorrow. So that when you start, you can instantly be productive. You can instantly know, oh yeah, this is what I wanted to do. Not all the ideas are going to come to you when you're at your computer. So is it in the middle of the night? Make a voice recording. I have a whole project of just, it keeps going, of all kinds of song ideas and whatever. Just save everything. You might end up combining things in those notes later. Number 7. So this one kind of goes hand in hand with the next one. Use relatable elements in a unique way. Take drum and bass, for example. There are certain things that have been done a million times, but because they use it in their own way, it's still interesting to listen to. So I remember when I started out, I started making dubstep, and dubstep I was very interested in the experimental side of it. So super random sound, crazy basses, and it was all over the place. That kind of made it, like I said, not a whole. It goes back to the previous tip of keeping it simple. That's actually just the tip on everything. Keep it simple. Using those relatable elements can work within a track too. For instance, the Cyber Psycho video that I made, it's the intro lead, the dun 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 dun. That kind of goes on for the whole song, and in the second drop, I used that same melody, but I just modulated the sound, which makes it able to kind of go more nuts because you have already been introduced to that sound. Obviously, from whatever favorite artists you might have, you're gonna know their sound. And number 8 is distribution of energy. This means in your song structure, in your layering, and the flow of the blocks I was talking about earlier. You might realize that I'm saying a lot of the same stuff in these different tips. That's because they're all foundations to each other as well. It all works together. It has to. It has to, but it works best if it works together. It's not a one-trick pony. Means, like I said, it can be in the song structure. So how do you set up your composition? It works great in the traditional intro, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, outro. Obviously, the intro is going to be lower energy versus the chorus. The chorus is going to have more energy than the verse, but the verse has more energy than the intro. So it's kind of like a staircase that kind of goes up and down and in between. And playing around with this can be a great training of, okay, I realized that the verse has way too many layers active. So those small background fillers that I was talking about, they add on to the energy, making sure that it flows is to just prolong those background fillers, for example, into the first verse, or emphasizing on the block change. I did a track where I was going from a full energy metal track into a choir. It was just completely silent, and then the choir came in. And that works because I'm making sure that that's the only thing that you're listening to. For instance, if it's a rap song and you want them really to listen to your story, you might not want an 808 that's 5,000 decibels above the freaking lyrics. So moving on to the next one. What I like to call the band rule. The band rule is basically only one element gets to go nuts at the same time, which means if there's a drum solo, the guitar is not going to do its own solo. The bassist is not going to go nuts at the same time either. This is something that will really help you keep it simple. For instance, in drum and bass, the basses are almost always the main focus. If you want the basses to go nuts, you have to make sure that everything else is kind of on the background. And I don't mean lower volume, but I just mean that they're more stationary, that they're more, that it's a little bit more unison, it's a little bit more bland, if you will. In the second part of this song, as you can see, the vocals stop, and then that is where the basses kind of go nuts. So you can hear it. So the basses are not really moving around while the vocals are. The vocals completely disappear when those basses get room to move and kind of juggle or kind of do flips or whatever whatever metaphor works for you. So keep that in rule. I like to call it the band rule. Funny story. I remember when I was I think 10 years ago almost. I'm a drummer, and I had a little band on a theater music school, and me and those band members also played in a blues cafe, and we had a guy who was the kind of an older singer, but he was a pretty good blues singer, and he had like the raspy, screamy voice, you know. That was just random on that same night. We got a background or just a helping guitarist. So from the band, it was that extra guy, the vocalist, the bassist, and me, the drums. So we got a little guitarist that was kind of nice, but the guy was doing his verses, and if you know from blues, vocals are kind of the root of blues. And this guy was it's not really a full-blown solo, but he was kind of doing like pentatonic ups and downs, and it was really distracting. And the guy was actually yelled at by the vocalist because like, dude, what are you doing? I'm singing. You can't just solo and improvise on the guitar. And I was like, that's the band rule. It's like the best example I can give for what works well, not just for the mental state and not guitars flying around, but just because it's not distracting you from whatever it is that should be in focus. And that brings me to my last one. Make everything. This means try to make as many genres as you want. You want to make hip-hop? Fucking awesome. Do other stuff too. Try to make house. Try to make cinematic. Do everything you can. Because if you focus too much on one genre, you might start to build walls around you. And that can work in a very limiting way. Somebody who makes cinematic, house, R&B, acoustic, singer-songwriter stuff, he has a lot more knowledge on what works in those genres, which he can use to his benefit. It works as a win-win because not only will you get a very broad palette, it will make you gain experience quicker. Going back to the painting on the wall, somebody who paints with just red is very limited versus somebody who knows how to use all the colors. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm done ranting. So I will play the song now and with text on screen. So I will show you what I did and how I did it, and I will use those 10 tips that I used.
Bye.